environmental groups.
Thank you. Alec Rohrbaugh. Oh, I'm sorry. Supervisor Delbar, you did have a question.
Yeah, just, Mr. Chairman, if I can follow up. I'm sorry, Alex. What I'm hearing then is we're using untested data from 2 states up that may or may not actually work, but we're using that in the North Coast watersheds. With that said, what's your view on site specificity? Because one river system in this county acts completely different than another river system in this county. Each watershed's in its own individual animal. And I would be concerned about using the data just from one watershed to another in this county, much less using something from 2 states up. Completely different atmosphere up there. What rationale is there for using that data, particularly since I now understand it's untested?
Well, the data from Washington was selected by our consultants, and they're experts in developing in-stream flow standards. They develop in-stream flow standards for the state of Idaho and have done extensive work. They believe the data was comparable and suitable for use in the 5-county area because they were taken from coastal areas. Again, in addition to that data, the data set was enriched with local data from the area, from the 5-county area. So it wasn't just the data from Washington State. We believe it's a suitable comparison and that it's scientifically supportable in terms of that data was used in combination with local data to develop the minimum bypass flow criteria. We believe it's sound, but your question is one that would be good to provide in comments, and we could provide a more detailed answer.
So the consultant also did some work in Idaho. Did they use the Washington data set to determine Idaho's too?
I don't know. Can't answer that right now.
That's a couple of states away from Washington, so it might, at least
it's a different, though.
Away.
That's a snowmelt versus, there are considerations, snowmelt streams versus rainfall streams. You can't use, it's not completely interchangeable. I don't think they said, oh, we'll take data from something that's completely uncomparable and try to apply it here. There was some consideration to apply similar area.
Well, I'm willing to bet that there's a big difference between Seattle and Covelo.
And again, it depends on how the data was used.
I also might mention that we did have the scientific basis for the policy was peer reviewed by a panel of noted scientists that were independently selected unbeknownst to us and that reviewed the scientific evaluation and analysis of the policy, and they have provided comments to us and recommendations. Those are also available on our webpage, but their considerations were, I don't think they really raised that issue with us at all.
They said that the data set was appropriate for use for the region that we're looking at here, that the data set they used was appropriate, that they could not see any data that they left out of the data set. So that was what their comments were on that.
Mr. Rohrbaugh, followed by Rudy Light. Oh, I'm sorry. I overlooked another one. It's getting towards the end of the day.
This consultant firm that you call the expert, I don't even want to ask what a novice is, but for the benefit of the audience and the viewing public, how much was this consulting firm's contract to do this study?
Just for the task 4.
For task.
Just 3, excuse me, yeah.
The total was 1.5 million. That's not just, the scientific study was less than that, but the total was 1.5 million.
To basically take some proposal from Washington State and sell it to you folks. I mean, it was basically come with no changes. As Supervisor Delbar, I mean, the rainfall and the watersheds of Washington State are not even similar to this area of California, especially from the Mattole south. Maybe from the Mattole north it may be somewhat similar, but certainly not from the Mattole south.
The criteria that they provided was essentially the amount of water, how much water does it take for a steelhead or a Chinook salmon or a coho salmon to actively negotiate a stream channel regardless of its location or the type of source of the water. What's the depth and velocity of the biology of that fish? What's the requirement of that fish to do that? So if you were to apply similar, how much water did it take in Forsyth Creek, for example, for a steelhead to negotiate that stream? It's the similar depth and velocities that, regardless of where that fish is in the watershed that it's in, it still requires the same amount of water to do that. And that's the type of data that they extrapolated from Washington, Oregon. However, their research could not find any data in California, similar data that they could use. Otherwise, they would have applied it. But the only thing that was in the scientific literature searches that they did happened to come from Washington, Oregon.
Okay, now Mr. Rohrbaugh.
Thank you. Alec Rohrbaugh from Hopland. The draft policy applies to applications to appropriate water, small domestic use, and livestock stock pond registrations and water rights petitions. What's the smallest pond to which the policy requirements apply from a technical, legal, and practical standpoint? Second question. The draft policy limits the amount of flow that can be diverted through the establishment of policy criteria, with the limits set at levels that will not impact the long-term viability of existing anadromous salmonoids. My question is, are these limits set conceding or recognizing the long-term viability concern to allow the maximum possible diversions? 3, the scientific basis and development of alternatives protecting anadromous salmonoids technical support document showed that limiting the maximum cumulative diversion to 5% of the 1.5-year instantaneous peak flow would result in a relatively small change to channel geometry. My question is, what would be the effect on fish population if the 5% were raised to 10%, 20%, or higher? I'll give you this copy of these questions, Eric. The legislature has required the State Water Board to adopt principles and guidelines for maintaining in-stream flows needed for the protection of fishery resources. In response to this mandate, the draft policy was developed to maintain in-stream flows to protect existing condition, probably a typo, for the benefit of fishery resources. And I think the gentleman from Fetzer, one of the gentlemen from Fetzer, asked, how will the success of the program be measured? That was my question also. So.
Thank you, Mr. Rohrbaugh.
Discuss the legal.
Yeah, I'll talk about, and I'm not going to express a legal opinion on advice of counsel. How's that? The size of pond in which the policy applies is essentially a question for water rights. You know, what size of a diversion or pond does water rights apply? There is no minimum. Statewide, in my memory anyway, the smallest one I've ever dealt with that did have a bypass requirement on it was measured in pints per minute, and it had 35 protestants to that particular application, and none of which were environmental protestants. We ended up with a bypass term to maintain in-stream flows, and not for fisheries, by the way. It was for other in-stream flow uses and other terrestrial species. But so the size is not a legal limitation at all. The policy itself, though, is in those circumstances would not be stringently applied by any means. These small ones, frankly, don't fit in the criteria. The 2002 guidelines also, Fish and Game, had an exemption criteria in it that said, under certain circumstances,